We're back for another week of the Rundown. I'm Keith Stewart from Read the Line. Of course, that's Len Hochberg alongside with me from RotoWire. Len, fantastic to see you last week out west at Riviera. It was like we had the RotoWire Rundown all week long as you and I were there on site checking out the action. I'm sure everyone had Hideki on their card, considering he hadn't had a top 10 since last year's Players. But the year continues on. 7 weeks, 7 winners outside. Well, I think Hideki started the week at plus 8,000, so outside 80 to 1. It's been an interesting start. There's no doubt about that. But you and I were there at Riviera, boots on the ground. Outside of Tiger, we'll get to him in a second. What was your biggest takeaway from the experience there at the Genesis Invitational?
Well, not exactly a surprise, Keith, but you were absolutely as nice a guy in person as you are here in these Zoom calls. So it was a thrill to finally meet you and spend a little time with you. So I enjoyed that. And but that's not what you're asking about. First of all, that the course was in such great shape. We were pelted by 100-year storms in the week before. I mean, that you got up at Pebble Beach and then went to Arizona. Well, it passed. That's what was here before Riviera. So the course was in fantastic shape. And by the way, it started raining Sunday night right after the tournament ended. So we really got a good break on that. Not a ton of surprises other than the finish with Hideki, who, by the way, was 100 to 1 on at least, or maybe 120 on Sunday morning. So if we want to give it a little asterisk there about the 3-figure winners and stuff. But it was a great week. There was some, huge disappointments with Tiger, with Spieth. But, in light of what happened at Pebble and at Phoenix, it was a pretty good week for the PGA Tour.
Well, I'll tell you, my biggest takeaway after at least certainly Riviera, but the last 3 weeks, and I guess more Pebble and Riviera than anything else, is that because those were signature events, is that if you look at the top 10 rankings in the world, Wyndham Clark's the only one with a win. And I think when we started the year, you and I don't think Wyndham Clark would have been in our top 5 guys that would have had a win in the first 7 starts on the PGA Tour out of the top 10 in the official world golf rankings. I think one of these guys needs to step up. And all of them had somewhat of a disappointing week at Riviera in their own way, whether it's Hovland or Scotty's putter or what's going on with Rory. It's all very interesting to me, but we're getting pretty close to Magnolia Lane time. It's about 2 months away. And I don't know. My biggest takeaway of the week was that I'm not sure which one of these guys is truly going to be the favorite when we get down to Augusta.
Somebody will have to win the Masters, right? And Wyndham Clark even said after he won that he had not been contending. So as much as Hideki was out of the blue this week, last week, I think the same could have been said of Wyndham Clark. He had not been playing all that well and certainly not contending since he won the Open. So, yeah, it is so wide open now. That's an excellent point.
Well, when we talk about surprises coming out of Riviera, I don't think any of us forecasted Tiger to only play, 24 holes in a day and a half in one round and 6 holes in the second round. It was a huge disappointment for the field, for all of the fans and everything. And I guess it was a surprise that it wasn't his back or his ankle that kept him from playing. For what little we saw of Tiger and the week in general surrounding, Mr. Woods, what are your takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was so disappointing, and you just felt the air come out of the course when he came off. It was like you weren't even, at where Tiger was, and you just sensed some ominous thing going on there. But he played Thursday, and he didn't end up with a great score, but he did have 5 birdies. And for better or for worse, the over-under was 3.5. So he blew past that. So he had a lot of good holes and a lot of good shots and maybe 6 bogeys. No shame in that at Riviera. No shame in that, not playing in all that time. So I don't know, cautiously optimistic that because as you said, it wasn't any of his surgically repaired body parts that were at issue. that if we see him at the Players, and it would be smart for him to play the Players, I think, to get some more reps before Augusta, that he could certainly make the cut and maybe a little bit more. And certainly at Augusta, where he doesn't even need a practice round. He doesn't need to go burn 18 holes or anything and, get tired or whatever, play 9. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Some of what you touched upon there is where I want to go with this part of the conversation. And that, when it comes to Tiger, I think he had some really strong personal goals this week. I think he knows he's felt better physically than he has since the car accident. He wanted to play 4 rounds and probably get himself somewhat into contention, at least probably a goal of getting inside the top 20 in that level of an elite field. So the fact that he got sick, which led him to have to withdraw rather than any of those surgically repaired body parts, as you so put it, to me, gives me a little bit of hope that we actually will see him before Augusta, because I think he really, that first round score really tells us that he's rusty. He needs the reps. 5 birdies and 6 bogeys and 7 pars is not a typical Tiger round that we remember. He was much steadier than that. And so I'm pretty excited by the fact that it was basically the flu that got him and not something else. And I think that his unfinished business this weekend is going to lead us to see him at least once before Magnolia Lane. And I think for all of golf, nobody wants to wait 6 more weeks until Augusta in order to see Tiger. So if we get to see him at the Players, I know the tour would love to see him at the Players. There were enough people in the media center begging for that. So like with you, I'm even more than cautiously optimistic. I think he wants to get some tournament rounds in after what he saw in that first round at Riviera before Augusta, because that's truly a place where he could make some noise just based upon personal experience and, I don't know, 5 green jackets alone. So, I'm excited about that. And, one of the things that we got to get excited about this week, and we've got 3 players in the top 40 in the official world golf rankings down in Mexico. But let's talk about the Tony Finau Open, or the Mexico Open at Vidanta, right? You're putting together your DFS lists. I'm putting together a betting card. Let's start with you. What are you featuring as a skill set at a golf course that we've only seen twice on the PGA Tour?
Yeah, well, we do have a little bit of information from the 2 years. Jon Rahm winning in 2022, Tony Finau last year. This is a Greg Norman design because the PGA Tour just can't seem to quit Greg Norman. They always need a Greg Norman course somewhere. It went from Mayakoba to now this week. But this is in a typical Shark setup. This is a course that that really favors long hitters, and it doesn't penalize you. There are wide fairways. I mean, that is Greg Norman just standing on the tee, the old Shark hat, just ripping it off and not caring where it goes. Well, caring where it goes, but you had a lot more leeway this week. So really see distance really matter a lot this week. And, interestingly, the score jumped from 17 under, the winning score 2 years ago, to 24 under last year, which means you're going to have to make some birdies. So I'm looking at guys who can hit the ball far, not exclusively, but that's certainly an edge. And you're going to have to make some putts on the Paspalum greens, and that's a bit of a wild card as well.
Well, you touched upon it right there. That seaside Paspalum is something that we see in Punta Cana. We see it at Puerto Rico. We saw it last fall at the Worldwide Technologies at El Cardinal. And now we're going to see it again here at Vidanta Vallarta. And, it's sticky. It's like Bermuda grass on steroids. And I think there's a certain type of player that enjoys that. I'm also favoring length, but I'm also favoring length in the approach game. This golf course, 40% of the approaches come from over 200 yards. And the tour average for that is like 23%. So long iron, like mid iron, but like long iron players are certainly someone that, catches my eye. The guys tend to hit the greens in regulation here. So I'm not overly concerned. Seaside Paspalum tends to be, again, sticky and slow. So getting up and down from around the greens hasn't been a major component of what Rahm and Finau have done in order to win. So for me, the long iron game, certainly length. I mean, okay, so we've had 2 tournaments there, and 5 guys have repeated in the top 10.
Hmm.
Rahm, sorry, he's not there anymore. Tony Finau, 2 times. Patrick Rogers, right? Brendan Wu and Cam Champ. Cam Champ has 2 top 10s in Mexico. Notoriously one of the longest players on tour. He only has 4 top 10s in the last 2 years, Len. So for me, when we break it down to the names, some of this history, recent history, I guess, some of the length, I'm interested. There's what, like 5 names up at the top there at the 10K range, and a lot of them are people probably they don't know them other than Tony Finau. Is there any value at the top of the board because these guys usually aren't there, or how are you breaking down the start of the DFS board?
Well, the first thing that jumped out that Tony Finau was at $12,000 on DraftKings. We don't see the 12,000. We used to see them with a little more regularity, but and we'll get to the other side where they dip into the 5,000s this week, which is a real surprise. But Tony Finau does not have a top 5 since he won here last year. It wasn't quite a full year because they played it at the end of April, so it's been about 10 and a half months. But he's only had 2 top 10s. Another thing about Tony Finau, when he arrived here last year, he was putting pretty well for him anyway, 44th on tour in strokes gained putting. Today, he's 158th. So he's like, Scotty Scheffler is shaking his head at Tony Finau on the green. I know, terrible, terrible. So I don't know. I think with that price and the way he's been playing, I think that's a little bit too much because at $12,000, you pretty much need him to win. But I think a popular pick just below him will be the number 2 guy in the field, Nikolai Hochberg, 34th in the world, not far behind Finau's 24th and dropping. And he played here last year, did not have a great week. He finished about 30th or 33rd or something, but he knows the course a little bit. So I think he's going to be a popular play.
Well, when you jump into the 9Ks, there's a lot of other kind of DFS names there. You've got Steven Yeager. You've got your guy, Ryo Hisatsune, right? Like where do we start to build this card from? I get the Finau point. I mean, he's lost strokes gained putting in 10 of his last 13 events, which goes all the way back to Mexico. Who do you like in the 9K range?
Yeah, I think there are some more, a larger group where we could build our lineup around. And my top play in the 9s is Taylor Pendrith. Long hitter. I think he's going to be a popular play. I've seen his name in a lot of circles already this week. He's a long hitter. He's a pretty good putter. That's a great combination this week. Ryan Fox, who's one of the top 50 guys in this field. Talk about an unknown, maybe the most unknown guy in the top 50 in the world, the New Zealander, really big hitter. Also a good putter. He hasn't played much on the PGA Tour, but he is a tour member now through the DP World Tour. I like him a lot. And Brandon Wu has not been playing well at all. But when you get 2 podium finishes in 2 years at this tournament, trying not to overthink things there.
All right, in the 8K range, you're talking about these podium finishes, or I brought up the top 10s with Cam Champ. Do you go with course history for these 8K guys? Because really, I mean, this is like the engine that makes your lineup go. Or are we going with somebody recently like Charlie Hoffman that came out of the blue and is recently playing well?
Yeah, it really is a dart throw. I know that people come to us for things, but they know and we know that there are 132 guys in this field, and it's such a crapshoot in a tournament like this. We always, pretty much we always expect to see, especially with no Rahm and with Finau playing badly, we could see a long shot hit this week. Couple of guys who stand out for me in the 8,000s. Davis Thompson. He's priced at 8,900 this week, and that's a bit of a sticker shock, but that's what he should be this week in this field. And Michael Kim is all the way down, I think, at 8,200. Michael Kim, every time I look at Michael Kim's stats, I think, wow, he's a little bit of a longer hitter than I thought he would be. He's not a big guy, but he hits the ball pretty far, not super far, medium long. And I think, he's another guy who can succeed this week.
One guy down in the 7K range that catches my eye because he wasn't around most of last year, and he seems like the prototype player. And if it wasn't for the fact that he had all that time off, Johnny Vegas, really suits this place. He bombs it. I mean, am I on the right track there, or are you featuring some other 7K guys?
Yeah, Johnny Vega is on my list. It's in my article on RotoWire, where you can see all my picks and more of an explanation than we can do here as we get through things fairly quickly. But yeah, Vegas is he's in the mid sevens, and I think he's going to be a popular pick. He's back from his injuries that cost him much of last year. Chesson Hadley also in the sevens, not a long hitter. He's really the one kind of shorter hitter that I am focusing on this week, but he's so good closer to the hole. We can't dismiss that. And one guy really down at the bottom of the seven, 7,100, Sam Stevens. He has had a couple of top 25s this year. You mentioned a stat at the top about approach from over 200 yards. He comes up very high in my model in off the tee and in proximity from over 200 yards. He could be a sneaky good play, and at 7,100 could fit into every lineup.
Folks, I'm telling you, Len nails these people, because when you look at the betting board, when it opened, Sam Stevens was at 90-1. He was at plus 9,000. He has dropped down to the mid sixes. That's how many people, when they started to look into this week, and usually it takes about 24, 36 hours for people to kind of churn through that initial board. And that's why you get so much value when the odds drop if you've done your prep work ahead of time. But Sam Stevens is a name that I'm definitely going to feature on my card. I'm not sure how many ways yet, but definitely 2 or 3 different ways, whether it's matchups, placements, and maybe even an outright. But I love that name, Sam Stevens. Now, speaking of names, you always come up with some all-star names down in the 6K range. But you mentioned there's also 5Ks. So I started to look at the 5Ks this week. There's 40 plus names in the 5K range. I mean, is your name in there? I don't know. I mean, I lost track at some point. But if you want to go heavy at the top, you're going to need to feature 1 or 2 of these guys. Len, this is your bread and butter. You got to give us some 6K and 5K guys.
And talk about not knowing the players without a scorecard. This week is absolutely it. Into the 6,000s. Name that jumped out, and I just picked him up in in our RotoWire season-long league. His name is Sami Välimäki, and the Finnish golfer, and he's a PGA Tour member now. He's 110th in the world. I mean, in this field, that'll get you in the Hall of Fame.
Certainly in the 6K.
Yeah, he's not a bad player. He's a very long driver and a pretty good putter. I seem to be focusing on those guys this week. He's had a couple of finishes the last couple of times out. We finished in the 40s. I think it was at the Farmers and certainly at Phoenix. Not a great week, but he made the cut, and he did finish with a 64 on Sunday in Phoenix. So that's the last time we saw Sami Välimäki. Vince Whaley, another name. I can't even remember why I picked Vince Whaley, but I researched him, and yeah,
he's long.
In the 5,000. So many guys. I just threw in 2 extra bonus picks in my article. Callum Tarrant. Callum Tarrant is a regular PGA Tour player. I mean, granted, he's 0 for 4 in cuts made so far in 2024, but at $5,600 in this field, and that's another thing. 132 guys, 65 in ties make the cut. More than half the field will make the cut. A lot of these 6,000s and a lot of these 5,000s will make the cut. And just one guy I want to throw out there. I don't even know if I want to play him or tell people to play him, but Omar Morales. He is a junior at UCLA. He qualified for the U.S. Open last year. He missed the cut. He played last year in the Mexico Open. He missed the cut. But he's a very good college player. He's way down, I think, at 5,200. You could fit about 40 Omar Moraleses into your lineup at that price. Maybe just something to keep an eye on, and a kid to keep an eye on that may be down the road.
Well, you dropped 2 great Easter eggs there that I caught. First was that you just said UCLA, which we were just down the road from, you and I. And then the second thing is that you were talking about, securing that scorecard in order to figure out who people were. Well, there was a lot of scorecard talk last week, a la Jordan Spieth. Folks, just keep your score. It's not that hard. It's not worth complaining over, right? It's something that we have to do. 14 clubs, 1 ball, the scorecard. It's not difficult. But what is difficult is picking winners on the betting side. Len. At least you get to pick 6. I mean,
Yeah.
another week where Hideki wins, and we haven't seen signs of Hideki Matsuyama showing up without an injured neck, and who knows how long. I mean, it seems like he withdraws more often than he finishes in the top 10 in the last 24 months. But I digress. I love a name at near the top of the board. I don't love the top of the board. The chalk, certainly they haven't been performing this year. And with Finau's, faulty putter, I don't know that I can go there either, but I do love Taylor Pendrith. Taylor Pendrith has 5 top 15 finishes in his last 7 starts. He's a bomber, and you have to be a bomber at this place. He's good from long range on approach, and he's actually a pretty good putter, and he's got good comps there on Seaside Paspalum. You want to go a little bit further down the board? Certainly, I said I love Sam Stevens, but another name that's been catching my eye because he's a good, talented player that's coming back from injury from around this time last year. But Mav McNeely has been playing better and better. Amex top 40. Then you go to Pebble Farmers top 40, Pebble top 40. Then he's top 5, or what was he, 6th at WMPO. I walked a bunch of holes with him. Man, he's the type of guy on Seaside Paspalum that can get the ball in the hole. He's longer than you think. A lot of people don't think of him as a very long guy, but if you get up next to him on site, you can see that pound for pound, he's up there like with a Wyndham Clark as far as strength goes. He bombs it a little bit, and in this field, he's had much better approach play as of late. And a lot of the models go pretty deep as far as rounds if you're not careful. But if you truncate that a little bit and you look at his last couple of starts, he's been gaining on approach, and that's certainly what we're looking for in the prototype player, at least from my perspective, is who can win this thing, right? So there's a couple names for you. I mean, it is what it is. We have 3 guys in the top 40 in the official World Golf Rankings. I think you've come up with some great names. I think I've got a couple of good betting outrights with which to hang your hat with, create a little emotional connection, and have some fun this week. How do you plan to take, to digest and consume the Mexico Open this week? Any big plans?
Well, yeah, the big watch party here at the Casa Hochberg here. Just everybody coming over. No, I will peek in here and there. Golf Twitter does a good job, even if I don't have the TV on or something. I'll keep an eye on it. I have to keep an eye on it, and more closer to once we get to the weekend. But I did have a question for you as you were talking about betting. It's so hard to identify a winner any week on the PGA Tour. But this week is just bonkers. I mean, would you recommend to the people in the betting market to maybe stay away from the outrights or temper the outrights, maybe mix it up, top 10s, top 20s, top 40s, any kind of all different types of bets where you just don't need a win or you're dead?
Well, okay. That's a great question. And this week, more so than others, you really have to diversify your card. And it makes a ton of sense on a week where maybe you don't know a lot of the names that you wait a round or two and then you really dive into the live markets. I wouldn't go deep in your outrights. I certainly would probably favor more placement bets than outright bets. This is one of those weeks where you really have to start to pay attention to what happens once play starts and then try to make as much hay there as you can. At the end of the day, all of these, you have to be able to create a story around who's going. If we're talking about winners, because picking winners is like splitting hairs, you have to be able to create a story in and around why someone would win. Now, 8 days ago, nobody was writing the Hideki story. But afterwards, it makes perfect sense with all the ties that we talked about between the comp of Augusta National and Riviera. How many guys have won at both? How many guys have played very well and contended at both? That all of a sudden, Hideki, if he was going to find some semblance of a game, it was going to be at a place that brought him back to the greatest moment in his career. So when you start to look at something like the Mexico Open and you say to yourself, okay, can Tony Finau repeat? Well, he's been striking the ball very well. He hits it super far, but can he close the door with all the shaky putting that he's had? And if you think that he can, well, you haven't been really paying attention to Scotty Scheffler or JT or some of these other guys at the top of the board. Now, you start to listen to Len and I, and you think about who's a bomber, who can putt on Seaside Paspalum, who's played well at Corrales at Punta Cana, who's played well at Puerto Rico in these weaker fields, who can step up amidst kind of a sea of similarity, then I think you're going to really start to find yourself with like, oh, wait, you know what? I can get a couple good top 20 bets here, and I'm going to do that this week rather than adding an extra outright. So your question is it's warranted every week, but certainly with a field like this, it's more valuable than ever, Len.
Good info, Keith. Good info.
Well, I tell you what, the excitement's just building for Thursday. So make sure you get whatever your lineups are or your betting cards in. Len and I, of course, will be back this time next week. We're going to shift from a quick trip to Mexico over to the East Coast, to my time zone. And we're going to be down in Florida, Bermuda grass, all the great events, the historic ones that we know. We're going to start there in West Palm Beach at what was the Honda Classic forever is now the Cognizant Classic at the Palm Beaches. If you're not sure what to title it, just add as many words as you can. That's what they do at the PGA Tour. We'll be back with the RotoWire Rundown. I'm Keith Stewart from Read the Line. That's award-winning writer, golf senior writer there at RotoWire, Len Hochberg. Len, it was awesome to see you last week. Catch you at the Rundown next week.
We'll be cognizant together next week, Keith. See you then.